With Henry Avery's capture of the ganj-i-sawai, the axe towards the crew and women aboard, and tensions that would rise between England and India, Avery not only identified himself as the wealthiest pirate alive, but also the first ever target of a worldwide manhunt. This is part 2 of Henry Avery. During the attack of the Mughal convoy, the captain of the ganj-i-sawai, Muhammad IBRAHIM, took it upon himself following the explosion of a cannon on the main deck to arm the slave girls and send them to fight the pirates. This was an act of cowardice, as they were not trained in battle, and the ship which saw leaderless tactics would surrender shortly after. Following the victory, according to the Indian historian Kafi Khan, the term orgy of horror was the best way to describe the aftermath. Avery's men would rape and kill their captives deck by deck, utilizing torture and barbaric measures to extract information on where the remainder of the treasure on board was hidden. The acts were so hideous that on October 12, 1695, Sir John Gale, the then governor of Bombay and president of the East India Trading Company, sent a letter to the Lords of Trade stating the following: "It is certain the pirates, which these people affirm were all English, did do very barbarously by the people of the ganj-i-sawai, and Abdul Gopher's ship, to make them confess where their money was, and there happened to be a great Umbra's wife related to the king, returning from a pilgrimage to Mecca, in her old age. She they abused very much, and forced several other women, which caused one person of quality, his wife and nurse, to kill themselves, to prevent the husband seeing them ravished." The pirates would finally get the information they wanted, and would succeed in finding the riches held hidden within the ganj-i-sawai. Avery and his men would leave the survivors aboard the ravished ship, and would allow them to continue their voyage back to India. The treasure on the label "the greatest ship in the Muslim fleet" totaled anywhere between 200,000 British pounds and 600,000 British pounds, including 500,000 gold and silver pieces. This was primarily the richest and most successful haul ever taken by pirates, and made Avery the richest pirate in history. Following the attack, Avery's pirates would begin dividing the treasure. There are some counts that Avery would persuade the other ship to keep the treasure aboard his ship, the Fancy, and sail away under the cover of night. Other accounts claim that clipped coins would be shared between William Mays and Avery's crew, as they were the only two ships to take down the large ship, with Avery's crew stealing those coins back. Nonetheless, it was a large haul and spread throughout the crew. Avery would sail to Bourbon and arrive around November of 1695. He would give 1,000 British pounds to each of his crewmates and additional shares of gemstones. However, this made Avery and his crew marked men. Some would part ways and sail to Nassau. Some French and Dane members stayed in Bourbon, while others remained under Avery's command. Avery would take this opportunity to purchase 90 slaves as laborers for the ship, and were considered the most consistent item for trade at the time. This would also allow the men to not use their foreign currency, as this would reveal their identities. When the ganj-i-sawai finally returned to harbor in Surat, the news of the attack and sacrilegious acts towards the women and men were considered an unforgivable violation of the Hajj. In addition, the attack also saw devastating consequences for the EIC, East Indian Trading Company, who at the time saw massive drops in their profit following the disastrous Child's War. Plus, relations between the English and India would be at their worst. The Indian governor at the time would see all English subjects in Surat arrested and under watch, primarily as a safeguard as the locals were rioting as news spread. The governor would see 4 EIC factories in India closed, and would scale an armed attack against the English city of Bombay with the want to expel England from India. The EIC was quick to act, promising to pay for all damages to this ship and lost treasure, and also identifying Avery and his crew enemies to the human race. The crown would revoke and exempt Avery from all acts of grace, meaning pardons and amnesties, and would place 500 British pound bounty on his head and a free pardon to anyone with information on his whereabouts. Soon after, the EIC would actually double the bounty, and the first ever worldwide manhunt recorded in history was underway. Avery was reportedly hiding in the Atlantic colonies at this time among some corrupted colonial governors, and was out of jurisdiction of the EIC. Eventually, the Board of Trade, having a larger influence and power, was tasked with a manhunt for both Avery and his crew. In March of 1696, Fancy would sail to Nassau and would send a few men to deliver a letter to the island's governor, Sir Nicholas Trott. The letter claimed that Fancy has a crew of 113 self-identified unlicensed English traders, and that the ship needed some shore time. The letter was signed by Avery, who was now identified himself as Captain Bridgman. They offered Trott a sum of £860 to keep their secret of being in violation of the EIC, and also offered their ship as a gift once all cargo was unloaded. Trott was tempted by this offer, as his island was very much undermanned, and being as the French had captured a settlement within 230 kilometers away, he was needing men and a ship to act as deterrents for any potential attacks on his island. And even so, if he turned away the crew, it could spell disaster, as a crew of 113 men could easily defeat the island's inhabitants. Trott would make the call following a meeting with Nassau's government council and welcome the crew to the island and give them access to their grounds. The Fancy was handed over to Trott, who along with the original bribe also found 50 tons of ivory tusks, barrels of gunpowders, chests of firearm and ammo, and multiple anchors all had been left in the hold for him. At first, Trott may have made a good call. However, the wealth of foreign currency that was presented began questioning if the crew were true unlicensed slavers. Trott would get word shortly after that the Royal Navy along with the EIC were hunting Fancy, and that Captain Bridgman was Avery himself. Trott would deny knowing the history of these pirates, and Bridgman had given him no reason to disbelieve him, even though the crew did have a vast amount of gold and silver of foreign coins. Trott would decide to sail the Fancy, once stripped of resources, into some rocks, ridding him of any and all evidence of the ship. When the proclamation for the apprehension of Avery and his crew reached Trott, he was forced to put a warrant out for Avery. He alerted the authorities as to Avery's whereabouts. However, Trott alerted Avery and his crew before the authorities could arrive, giving Avery and his 113 men time for a hasty escape. Avery would give his crew conflicting information on where he was going, whereas to mix details if any should ever be captured. 25 of his men were apprehended and 5 executed. As for Henry Avery himself, he was never seen from again. There is a lot of conflicting information coming after this, with a lot of unknown of what is right and what is wrong. Some claim that Avery sailed to England or North America. Others claim that Avery passed away in Devon, being cheated of his wealth by merchants, or had died in Barnstable and buried as a poor man, etc., etc. We don't necessarily have the information to merit how Avery died, and to be honest, it appears his plan to tell conflicting stories to his crew worked very well. But what we do know is that Avery had a big moment in history. Having captured the ganj-i-sawai, it made him the most wealthiest pirate in history. But by indulging in the hideous acts to gain that wealth, he built tensions between two economic powerhouses and created unity between two nations, and made himself the most wanted man in the world. Not knowing what happened to the final moments of Henry Avery will be in our history books, but we do know that his name is well known and stamped in the history of time. But he is not forgotten. Henry Avery has been displayed in many of our current popular cultures. Henry Avery was mentioned several times in the Doctor Who series of 1966 and in 2011, being mentioned on the TV series Black Sails, having various book series written about him or a moderation of him, featured in the popular game franchise Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. But for the time being, Henry Avery will forever be known as the wealthiest of pirates, who brought the most instability between two nations, which in turn started the very first worldwide manhunt. Thank you for watching, and remember to hit that like, sub button, and ding that bell to know when content gets uploaded. Make sure to heal, please heal, and safe sailings.